So we've got three very different people from three very different parts of the industry, but if the conversation up here is even half as good as the conversation backstage, I think we're in for a good one. John, let's start with you, because you're AT&T, and 5G is very much in the news. There's a lot of talk about the rollout of 5G, U.S. efforts versus China efforts, concerns about China and eavesdropping and the like. But one thing that I've been thinking about is that when you read news stories or hear podcasts about this, people talk about 5G as driving the next wave of technology, as driving artificial intelligence in particular, self-driving cars. I question that a little bit. What specifically is 5G going to drive? Where's the bottleneck that's going to alleviate?
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of attach the wireless technology to 1, 2, 3, 4G, and so the progression of 5G feels like it should be a lot more megabytes for your money and a cooler handset, because in 4G, the center of 4G was the device, and it spawned an entire industry around the app economy and all that sort of stuff. In the center of 5G is actually life, and so about every decade, the infrastructure swings from distributed to centralized. And while many people think of a cloud strategy differently, architecturally, there's no such thing as the cloud. It's just somebody else's computer, and it's really centralized. And 5G is going to become a real-time network where we swing back to decentralized. So it's so magnificent because everything that anybody builds historically is now in the wrong place, because compute and storage and all those things are going to swing really close to the customer again. And why everybody's concerned with all these things is because when compute and storage are there not in a blink of an eye, but a 20th of a blink of an eye, it's going to be as fast as your brain can process. And so algorithms are going to run locally. So things are moving from central places where they can kind of be seen and managed back into a distributed world. And so I just mentioned like three really important dimensions. The first is that the architecture of all of our infrastructure is going to change. The second one is the algorithms aren't going to phone home. They're going to be done locally. And thirdly, and importantly, when you get to real-time networking, you can start to have things like man-machine interfaces working in real time. And that's going to be, I think, an extraordinary new world. So, like, I'm not prone to hyperbole, but it is the most exciting technology I've seen in my career, which obviously has spanned a few decades.
Got it. So what you mean is, moving the processors to the devices, to the cars.
No, not to the devices and the cars, in the network, which is very different.
Okay, got it. And Sebastian, so what do you think of this? You helped found the self-driving car program at Google. One of the main applications we hope on the horizon is self-driving cars. Is the network important to that particular revolution, and how so?
First of all, when it comes to 5G, this is above my pay grade. Honestly, I've done a lot of stuff in my life, but
Nothing's
I'm not
above your pay grade.
I would argue that connectivity is crucial, and we've just seen the pinnacle of the iceberg here. Google cars or Waymo cars, when they see a construction zone, they talk to each other, so that the second car crossing the same construction zone doesn't have to make the same learning impression. But that's just the beginning. I think as we move to a hyper-connected world, we can have dynamic routing, we can have incredible update on situations that might be dangerous or cause risks to vehicles that we don't even do today. I think that's going to be a really transformational experience to have this strong connectivity.
I see. Okay, got it. So, Kent, on to you. A big part of the discussion today at the conference has been the ethics of artificial intelligence, concern as these technologies continue to progress. Google is in many ways at the heart of this. not just with self-driving cars, but so many other technologies. You're mainly concerned, it seems from the outside, with how to deal with these technologies through various ethical principles and the like after they've been built. Does it affect the way they're built? Do you think about that as you look across Google and so many different things are being constructed? Do you try to instill that type of thing earlier in the process?
Absolutely. From the earliest days of the company, when Larry and Sergey were framing the mission statement, part of it was that the notion of what we do is to build products and services that significantly benefit people around the world. So when it came time to start to consider the implications of advanced technologies, including 5G, AI, virtual reality, a whole host of things, we wanted to be out there with our AI principles. And not just the principles, which we put out and focus on social benefit and a variety of other factors, but going on beyond that to talk about practices for great engineering in some of these areas, governance questions about how governments around the world should think about some of the balances and back and forth. So now it comes time for us to actually implement a lot of that work, and we're building out platforms, tools internally to review. We've reviewed over 100 deals, I think, so far, but also thinking about questions like which papers should you publish and which should you not? What should you open source and what should you not? So that's very much being built into the warp and woof of what we do every day.
I want to get back to a couple of those points in particular, but I want to move back to John a second, and you, Sebastian. You mentioned the principles. We've talked a lot today about Project Maven, the Defense Department project. In many cases, it's sort of the stakeholders who have been talking. I would love to get some outside opinions. Sebastian, you're now outside Google. John, you're obviously outside. How do you view this situation? So much concern of late has been raised over the ethics of AI, so to speak, building things for the DoD or bias with machine learning algorithms. How do you see these things?
Well, I think that there are going to be parallels between kind of the non-machine world, the physical world processes that we run. So we paused for a period of time before we went into deployment on robotics, process automation, machine learning, to step back and build the 10 Commandments. And we came back with, I think, a view that was a human-centric set of policies. And that is that everything in our business, every outcome is owned by a human being. No one can say an algorithm did it or a machine did it. So everything that is launched algorithmically, robotically, is owned by a human being. A machine can't control a machine without a process that's involved. If you change jobs, these are like children, algorithms. If you change jobs, you have to turn over to the new person that algorithm. Everything that's put in has to have a rewind button. We have a PhD in psychology who makes sure that they have a red button they can press when they feel like manipulation is happening in any way, shape, or form. So we put a structure and a process in place to make sure that what we do programmatically, what we do algorithmically, and what we do with a machine doesn't change the fundamentals of our accountability within the business. And now you look and say, well, what does that mean for who you serve? What does that mean for how you serve them? We're looking for this thing to improve upon what we do for customers, serving customers, but it doesn't change fundamentally how we do things because we still are a human-centric company.
I mean, I look at AI as a tool, very much like a shovel or a kitchen knife. And when it comes to ethics, I think there's ethical ways to use a kitchen knife, and there's unethical ways to use a kitchen knife, and they've been around forever. What really is AI? I think that's where people are somewhat divided on. I think it's something very, very simple. First of all, when we talk about AI, we talk about machine learning. We don't talk about real intelligence. And machine learning is an innovation in computers. Computers are dumb. To make the computer do the right thing, in the past, someone had to write down this elaborate kitchen recipe of every possible step what the computer should do, and the computer would blindly follow those rules. The innovation in machine learning is that you can now, instead of giving a computer these rules, you can give it examples. And the computer forms its own rules from those examples. So computer programming has become easier as a result. Children can now program computers by just giving examples. The implications, in my opinion, are groundbreaking for society. Perhaps the most important work I've seen is where computers now watch experts performing work and pick up patterns of expert work and help novices to be as good as the best experts. So one of your people in the audience is runs a company called Cresta that looks over the shoulders of salespeople, picks up what makes for a good sales dialogue, and then advises novice junior salespeople how to interact with the customer, thereby doubling basically the performance of a sales agent. There's other examples in medicine where AI systems have been developed to look over the shoulder, for example, of dermatologists, and have been found to be as good as the best human expert in recognizing skin cancer. And if you look at this, it takes typically like 10,000 hours to become an expert, and now it might just take 1 hour. And the benefits to us, society, is we're going to have better doctors, and we're going to have a much more access to high-quality medicine, for example, just for this innovation. And that, like, become an expert on day one, I think is a perspective that I would love anybody to take home with you, because it shows the opportunity of this technology and what we can accomplish with this technology. It's not a frightening thing. I think the name AI is a misfortune name because it seems to compete with us. But it really becomes a tool that augments us as people.
It does in many ways, but there is a flip side. And John talks about putting essentially a framework in place to try to think about these issues. You talked about your AI principles, where you're kind of laying out how you build and deploy these things. There are a lot of people, even people who take your point, who are very concerned about this. And they see Google's principles and they're not necessarily comforted, and they want to know how these are enforced. It's one thing to lay them out, but these very large companies, Google included, have other motivations, right? Companies change, financial motivations intervene. How can an outsider be sure that those principles will be enforced? How do you make sure that happens?
So we've tried to have transparency internally and over time externally with regard to how we approach these issues by having a regular cadence of trying to push forward the discussion through a variety of public papers that we've put out there. We think we are helping inform the debate. We hope we are, and we'd like to listen to lots of views of our employees, views of our customers, views of governments around the world, because we're just one of many actors who are trying to collaboratively move this space forward and help create norms about what should be done here. There are a lot of important issues that we've put out. Obviously, the focus on social benefit and safety, but also human-machine interaction, questions of regarding explainability, issues with regard to fairness and discrimination, questions of accountability and liability. There are no obvious answers to any of these issues, and in many cases, those various principles are in tension with one another. So as we go forward, we're trying to make sure we have an open dialogue with our employees, with our customers, and increasingly with the public. So our goal is to continue to be very open and transparent about the way we're making decisions here so people can judge us by our actions.
Outside of them just judging, what about regulation? I'd like to hear from all of you on this. Maybe you first, Kent. I mean, what about the possibility of regulation? For some people, that gives a more concrete assurance that these types of principles will be enforced.
Sure. The tech sector has always had lots of different regulations, from privacy to copyright to safe harbors and the like. We're fans of regulation when it's smart regulation. And what do I mean by that? So regulation that starts out with a really crisp definition of what's the problem you're trying to solve, that is then narrowly tailored to solve that problem and minimize blowback and side effects. And then third, a thoughtful analysis of what the second and third order implications of those rules might be. When you apply that to artificial intelligence, I think it's most likely that we will start with the applications. It's rare that you regulate basic research because there's so much risk of deterring innovation that could be really incredibly productive along the lines that Sebastian was talking about. But as you get into applications, whether it's financial services or healthcare or agricultural productivity, we already have a thoughtful series of laws and rules around that, and it would be natural to expand those into the issues that are raised by AI.
Where do you stand on this, John? People
I'm-
talk about GDPR, for instance, as an example of where this type of thing can work. Can you apply something similar to that?
Well, I think if it's important enough, it should be legislated, and I think that you start with the law before you put a beat cop on. And I think that I think these things are profound enough that we've suggested we need to relook at an Internet Bill of Rights to take a bunch of these issues, like net neutrality, like privacy, and modernize and say we've got to get the law. If you turn it over to regulators, you get a new regulator, you get a new viewpoint. And so there's a tendency sometimes to swing back and forth. And I think when you look at privacy, I think people have expectations that need to be aligned to law so that they don't end up with a new regulator causing a change that they just weren't aware of. And so I think I want to say, though, I think that forums like this and this public debate is exactly the right thing we should be doing right now to get the smartest people asking the hardest questions and drive ourselves towards answers, because these are some of the most profound questions of our generation.
Sebastian, right?
You don't like regulators, do you? When it comes to AI, there's been this cry for regulations. I mean, Elon Musk famously believes that we're going to be enslaved by these machines very soon. And if you don't regulate, it's going to happen. I would say it's important, but it's premature. I mean, I work a lot with regulators in my job, and I would say the core of what I care about as a CEO and what regulators care about is the same thing. It's usually safety, and it's opportunity, and it's protection of the people. But I would believe that the right time to engage in a meaningful dialogue is at the time when we see abuse. Right now, it's such an early nascent industry that I'm much more interested in teasing out the possibilities than cutting ourselves back in some artificial way. I mean, I wouldn't even know what to regulate. Is it the number of machines? Is it the size of the data set? Is it, what would it be for AI? I think we have to learn to use this tool, and as the tool will be abused, and it's certain it's going to get abused in some ways, then step in and understand what mechanisms to put in place.
Kent alluded to this, and Sam Altman at our conference yesterday talked a lot about it. The way AI research typically works today is most of the research, the important research, is openly published, free for anyone across the globe to make use of. In some circles, there's a movement to try to restrict that, that as some of these technologies become more dangerous, potentially, that companies like Google across the globe need to think about holding some of that back. First, Sebastian, where do you see that?
I am a big fan of open spreading of information. I would never have gotten my career had others not spread information openly to me. And speaking for Google, where I used to work, Google is very broadly sharing its work on things like deep learning through products like TensorFlow that are open source, that are given to the world free to use. I think that approach of spreading information openly in the Western society and in the world is core to who we are and why we exist today.
What do you think, Ken? Does there come a point where Google has to think long and hard about whether or not it should release its latest natural language processing model, which could be used to spread misinformation, that kind of thing?
So we do want to be very thoughtful about this. We recognize that there are social responsibilities as well as a desire to fulfill the goals that Sebastian's correctly laid out of being a source of new information that raises all boats. An example recently we had was a paper that was using ML to do lip reading, which is incredibly beneficial for people who are losing their hearing, people in the disabled community, et cetera, but also potentially could be abused by authoritarian or totalitarian governments to do surveillance. And we had serious internal discussions about the nature of the research, where other researchers were in this area, and came to the conclusion that the beneficial use case was very immediate and direct, and the risks were very remote, and for various reasons this research would not be all that supportive of the bad cases. So in balance we decided to publish the paper. but it's exactly the kind of internal discussions we're having as we face these choices. We do want to be a continuing contributor to the world's growth and knowledge about these technologies.
One project that keeps coming up during the conference is Project Maven, the Defense Department project. We talked a little bit about this backstage. John, how do you as an outsider view that? Google and other companies helping the DoD build artificial intelligence that can recognize images captured by flying drones. There's the potential to be used with weaponry. How do you view that kind of thing? Industry working in tandem.
Well, I can't sit from the outside and comment on another company's decision without having the same set of facts. Otherwise, it'd make me a reporter. But I'm just kidding. I couldn't resist it. It was a softball. No, I think in this day and age, you probably more than any time in my career, when you look at the traditional constituencies, you form this company which is a legal entity, and you have shareholders, and you have fiduciary responsibilities to them, and you have customers, and you have to provide value to them, and you have employees. And I think that increasingly that these debates and the friction that can occur between them is probably the most challenging that we've experienced. And I think these are tough decisions. And I would hesitate to second guess anybody's decision, but I would say that every company right now, more than it has in the past, has to look at these things and weigh them. And you may come to a different decision if your only competitive advantage as a company is how well you recruit, and a very different decision if you have a really low turnover, much more experienced workforce. And so you start to weigh these things as a company, as a society, the communities you serve. I mean, if you look, we haven't even talked about that dimension of it, but that's a really important issue right now of, how are we applying technology into communities? How are we applying technologies that are expensive in these new worlds to make, we always talk about technology making the world better, but are we making the richest part of the world better? And what are we doing with all that stuff? These issues are there in every company, and I think you have to have a process. You have to have thoughtful people. Your best minds have to be on it, and then you have to make some calls that are going to be really tough as described by when you make them, you're going to be really unpopular with a constituent for a period of time. But I think that's where a moral compass, a great set of values that you can point to, and really rigorous ethical discussions are going to make a huge difference, because you're going to make calls like that, and every company is going to have to make them going forward.
One more question for Sebastian, then we'll open it up to the audience. What about the possibility of autonomous weapons? You talk about the positive effects of that's one thing that people question, and the technology is certainly pointing in that direction.
I mean, you might raise the question, are weapons good or bad? And again, this is a long debate. I grew up in a part of the world that has historically been at war almost endlessly. We had decades of war in Europe where Christians would kill Christians. I think I counted between England and France in the last 1,000 years, 26 different wars. And I was born, very fortunately, in a period of peace where European Union, the interstate commerce, the cultural exchange led to basically unification of this entire region with a small speed bump called Brexit. And to me, this has been an amazing gift at this point. And I think you can't marginalize things like the military in retaining that set of peace around the world that is really unique. As such, I think it's wrong to go after one specific aspect, because in the end of the day, I would say it's always the way we use it, we leverage it. Whether we act responsibly in the interest of the people of the world or we act irresponsibly. And I would say history is on the side of the people who act responsibly and bring peace to the world. We have an amazing prosperity behind us in the last decades. Global poverty is rapidly on the decline. The people we worry about are called terrorists. They don't even have the guts to show themselves, and they tend to usually lose. They're not strong enough to take out our military assets anymore, so they just take out random people to anger us in many cases. I think when you look from that perspective, I would say technology, including technology in the military, which is a big technology driver, has really served us well as people, and we should be honest about this. So that's why I'm less worried about one specific aspect of use of technology and much more interested in the people that make those decisions using those technologies.
Okay. A couple quick questions from the audience. Right here.
Thanks to all three of you for this terrific discussion. What's interesting, the thread that's woven throughout all are the comments around ethical decision-making and even morals. And what I wonder is, in John, your case, AT&T, very mature organization, Google, mature organization, Sebastian,
not so mature.
Not so mature.
Thank you.
Immature.
What I wonder is, how are each of you thinking about your cultures and how your culture reinforces or not right now the fact that woven into all the decisions you're needing to take as AI permeates your business, this concept of morality and ethics that maybe proliferates in a different way than it has before?
I'll start. I'm blessed because our company has a soul and a heartbeat and always has. If you look at everything that matters, volunteerism, philanthropy, we are always one of the top couple in the United States. Our people expect this to be part of our dialogue, and it's not foreign to us. So I don't want to project onto anybody that that's sort of magic. I showed up there and with that magic already present, and all I've had to do is shape it.
Go ahead.
So it's been an active part of our conversation ever since we started out as trying to figure out how we would navigate currents around the world when you're trying to share information broadly in different ways with lots of different legal systems, lots of different ethical systems. There's a constant conversation that goes on internally. We, from the very early days, had our TJF sessions where everyone in the company could come out and ask Larry and Sergey questions and debate and discuss different issues. And in a engineering culture, which is largely what Google is, there is that tradition of robust conversation, debate, and collectively trying to get to the best answers we can. And we're proud to continue that and try and drive it forward. And also listen, not just inside the company, but again, outside. Because there are lots of smart people who are debating back and forth how best to navigate here. When it came to our AI principles, we wanted to put social benefit first, but we also recognize that there are some in the AI community who are very concerned about the lethal autonomous weapon question that was discussed here, and that was an area to proceed cautiously. But these other areas as well are going to be significant questions for all of us over the course of the next decades as these tools become more and more part of daily life. AI is not the future, as one of these slides showed. We're already living it, right? If you use Google Search or Google Translate or don't get spam in Gmail, all of that's because of AI. And so we're trying to become increasingly robust and thoughtful about how we can help others lead this conversation forward.
Thanks to all three of you. Really appreciate it.
Great.